Hey, hey, hey. Hello and good day. I'm your host, Regina Randall, and I'd like to welcome you to Faith in Theory. It was important to me as a therapist to start a podcast that provides down-to-earth, practical steps to overcoming life's challenges. And as a licensed minister, it was also important to me to share just how much those therapeutic principles actually line up with the Word of God. The goal of Faith in Theory is simple: to create a safe space that leaves us feeling empowered, supported, loved, and refreshed. That said, are you ready? I sure hope so, because this episode starts right here, right now on Faith in Theory.
Okay, guys, come on, let's chew the fat. How you doing, Regina?
Oh, good. How are you? The chewing the fat.
Talk to me.
All right, I am super excited. This is awesome. Okay, so Mr. Nate, I view you like a father, a mentor, this person you can go to for like answers, this like whole well of wisdom. So when it comes to really, I guess looking at the practical side of fatherhood, manhood, based on faith, what we experience, you was just like a no-brainer, the go-to person. I talked to Richard and asked what he thought about it, and Richard immediately was like, "Yeah, that's good."
I don't feel like I'm even close to the same level. Like when she asked me, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll be there," because I like talking to Nate, but I'm not sure I can impart the same wisdom. Nowhere close to what you've been to both of us. Just throughout the years. Just awesome to talk to, just like honestly the best people we've met just in general. So yeah, it has been an honor and just great to know you guys and just get as close as we have and learn as much as we could from you. So yeah, that's why I'm like, I don't know how much I can offer, in this session.
Don't underestimate yourself, Richard. I heard you sound like that before when we used to do our men's Friday night Bible studies at St. Peter's, and you would come out of that shell and lay out some wisdom, man. That I turned my head to the side, start scratching. I said, "Dang, man, this dude is keeping all this stuff to himself," and the good thing about it is, with both you and Regina, you speak on common sense terms, and that's the way I like it. I don't, like I told you before, I don't like all this Christianese and stuff, trying to impress me, man, with what your Bible knowledge is. You start sounding like you've been baptized with sour vinegar or eating green or something. So.
Yeah, I feel like you can't even really reach anybody when you do that. I feel like you actually not only don't reach them, but you turn them off. Because before I was saved, and I would hear all that stuff. Like, man, I don't want to hear that. Like you feel like you're hypocritical because I hear what you're saying, but I see something completely different when you're walking around or when you're saying something. So it's like it's always better to just talk to people as people. Don't talk to them as like with the Christianese as you better than them because I've been studying this stuff. I know this stuff. You're not really better than anybody. None of us are better than anybody else. So let's just speak to each other as individuals, as people, and you get connections, you get people understanding, and you get people actually wanting to change when they hear somebody that's like them. Have just seen more and start seeing different perspectives and trying to do better. But they sound just like me. Like that's what you want.
Anytime that you got to go all out, you or Regina or Tina or myself, to try to tell people that I'm a Christian, you ain't got it. People should be able to see it coming out of you. As Peter said, we're peculiar people. Yeah. And I like to have that peculiarity. One of the best lines I've ever heard in that area was when I was in the Navy, and I was in a commissary over in San Diego one time, and I remember after meeting some people there. After about a week or so, one of the guys, he said, man, he said, something is going on with you. I said, why you say that, man? He said, every time I see you, man, you got this smile on your face, man. He said, it ain't like the smile with the cat with his hand in the cookie jar. He said, but it's like when it's just somebody got something that I want. And that's what you want people to feel. They want to be able to, they should be comfortable around you without you ever having to say, well, hey, I'm born again, I'm Christian. If somebody says, are you a Christian, are you saved? Usually that should come after they've been around you enough to see what kind of person you are and understand that you are part of a royal priesthood, that's the way it should be. So I agree 100% with what you just said.
One of the biggest things that people notice with me when I go out, like, it's like, you know what? I never hear you cuss. I was like,
yes, yes,
like you talk different. I'm like, well, no, I don't do that. I don't really feel, that's
Richard,
I did that a lot when I was in the Navy, but I'm like, that's not my belief now. I believe we can be better than that. So that's just my thoughts. And
what you just said just now, you brought a short little story to my mind. When I was coaching youth football here in Pensacola, and I coached youth football about 6.5 years, close to 7 really. And what wound up happening is that out there in Bellevue, you guys know where Bellevue is at, and Bellevue Community Park. When the kids are practicing football, all of the age groups from mini mites, 5 and 6 to 7 and 8 for mites, and for 9 to 10, 11, 12 midgets, and juniors. All of those kids are practicing in the same practice location. The field is just divided up in sections. All right. Well, the parents are sitting there on the side of the hill, and they can hear and see everything that's going on out there, whether it's with your group or no. They can hear it because the acoustics are such that it's like that. Okay. Well, I remember one day these parents came up to me and said, Coach Dancy, can we speak to you after practice? I said, yeah. So of course my mind is going all over the place. I'm like, oh man, what have I said? What did I do to their kid out here, or whatever? Well, when our kids started running their wind sprints, I went over and I said, yes, ma'am. She said, well, Coach Dancy, you probably wonder why we called you over here to the side. And I said, well, ma'am, the thought did kind of enter my mind. And her husband was standing there too. He said, listen to why we called you over here, and don't take offense. I said, okay. So I'm bracing myself. The mother said, are you a Christian? And I looked at her. I said, well, yes, ma'am, I am. She said, you probably wonder why we said it. I said, yes, ma'am. Her husband said, because we've been coming out here. We've had 5 kids. We've been coming out here for the last 10 years. We have never once heard you cuss or swear at the kid. You yell like all the other coaches, but we've never once heard you cuss or swear. And we notice one big thing. When you get on a kid, at some time during practice, you have your arm around that kid away from everybody else. Talking about, I said, yes, ma'am, I'm trying to explain to them why I did what I did, say what I said, because I'm trying to build them back up. And she said, you have changed the life of my son, that he is so much more obedient to us now at home. Wow. And she said, all because we never once heard you cuss one time. So what you just said, Richard, what happened to you at work, I know that to be a truism because it's happened to me at least on 2 different occasions.
Yeah. And that's, what that whole thing is, that's part of, what we're talking about today. I feel like that's a major thing with manhood. Like if you set the proper example and you're not like domineering over somebody, but you're teaching them and you speak to them in a certain way with, not with condescending or talking down to them, but with exactly with dignity and like who you are. You're not trying to speak to them, downward or anything like that. But you're not trying to speak soft either. So there's some strength in what you're saying and who you are, especially as a man. Like we have to be that. And that sets an example that you don't have to be, an a-hole or cussing or doing all that stuff to show that you're a man. And I feel like, young men, when they see that you're that constantly, like that's just you, it's not an act, that's just you. When that's the real you, they learn from that. They understand that you don't have to be all this other stuff that you see either in hip hop, or you see some of these coaches that talk down and just beat down on their players. Like, you don't have to be that. So yeah, it's a lot more to just manhood and just being a man than just I'm in charge, I'm the domineering guy. It's gonna be this and that's it. Yeah, you can't be that. That's not gonna do anything. That's just gonna lead us to the wrong direction. And it has been, to me, like just throughout the years, what we see in society that's going on today. A lot of it is because men are not being who they're supposed to be.
That's right.
I got a question for both of y'all. So I know my husband's background. I know the things that you shared with me, or with us, Mr. Nate. Not all of us started out in church all our life, right? How would you say not starting out in that religious sect, or you like being programmed for like the Christianese that you talk about? How would you say not having grown up like that shaped the way that you operate today, just as a person and a believer? That's for both of y'all.
For me, because that's specifically what has happened to me. Even though, growing up, I went to church, but I wasn't in the church. I went to church because of my grandmother. I didn't live with my grandmother. I lived with my mom and my dad. I lived with my parents, but we went to church every Sunday, with my grandparents. So we went to church, and that only lasted for so long. I'd say probably about 12 or 13. I'm thinking 13, because that's when we kind of moved away, is when we stopped going to church. So I feel like I was living in LA, South Central LA, from birth to 13, 14 years old. Then my parents was trying to get us, specifically me, away from just the stuff that was going on in LA. So we moved to a suburbs area for my whole high school time. But I liked LA so much. Right after that, I went right back to LA. I got you. Yeah. But I feel like for me specifically, I think it was a great thing that I did not grow up in the church, specifically because of what you were saying, Gina, that when you grow up in the church, the way stuff is today, it feels like it's told to us or taught to us to perform. I feel like you're supposed to perform a certain way. You're supposed to perform as you're a believer, or you're a Christian, or you're this and you're that. And that performance is supposed to show you as like you're supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to do everything the right way all the time, no matter what, all that stuff. And I feel like you learn so much of the wrong things. And I feel like that takes you farther away from the word while you're actually reading the word, which that sounds weird, but I feel like that's what it is. For me, I didn't read the word. I didn't know any of that stuff. So I learned, just what the world is. I learned the secular part of it. And then meeting Gina, and just as time went by, she didn't even push me into that, but I knew that was something that was her. And I felt like it was something, well, let me learn, let me see, what's going on with it. And as my life kept going, God was telling me just certain things after another. One of my biggest, still probably my biggest thing, is that I didn't want to get into religion or any of that stuff, or the word, mainly because of hip hop. It was mainly because of music. I'm a big music person, and I listened to a lot of music, and all of it was bad. All of it was bad, but I loved it. So I didn't want to lose my music, because when you hear about being a Christian, all that stuff, you think you have all these rules. You got to be a certain way. You got to do a certain thing, and you lose out. You automatically, when you're not a Christian, you automatically think you're going to lose out. So while I'm thinking that, God is giving me alternatives to my music. We met what's his name, Mark in Virginia Beach. He turned me on to a hip hop artist that when I listen to him, like he sounds just like the stuff that I listen to, but he's positive and he's talking about Christ. So I'm like,
Gotcha.
okay, so that's a plus. I'm like, okay, so I'm not gonna lose out. So I started listening to that, and then he actually shifted my focus from hip hop to other types of music that was positive. I'm like, okay, well, I don't really even need to listen to that stuff. So that was my beginnings of understanding that you don't
Gotcha.
lose anything once you start reading and understanding the word, God, Christ, all that stuff, and you get that relationship. What you think you lost, it's probably it's great, honestly, because and you don't even think
Right.
about it. You don't even think you need it anymore. So I feel like you start out in the secular world and then you learn the right way. Like I said, all my stuff was secular, and then I learned the right way. I actually learned the right way. I didn't grow up in that Baptist stuff. I learned when I really started um, learning there was a pretty decent church that was in Virginia Beach, pretty diverse, and a lot of stuff they were saying was really good and made me read more. And then I met you guys, and it's you specifically, just seeing your interaction, who you were, and knowing that you're all about the word is like, yeah, it's you're not missing anything when you lose that secular thought process. So I felt like I learned, and again, maybe it's just me because I learned from the right person, from the right people. I didn't grow up in that instance, but I feel like if you started out secular and you actually start reading the word and understanding, I think you can kind of grow. I think
I
you can grow a
agree.
little bit better
I
than
agree.
the ones that grow up in church and learn wrong.
Well, I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and I know Regina talked to me before when she read one of the devotionals I wrote concerning my background, because I grew up in what was known as the Central Ward. Newark broken down in wards. You had the North Ward, South Ward, East, West, and Central Ward. And the Central Ward was 99.9% black. Okay, the North Ward was Italian. The West Ward was Irish and a sprinkling of blacks here and there. The Ironbound section of the South Ward was Polish and Hispanic. So I mostly stayed around the Central Ward, and it was low income housing that was there. I grew up in 12-story high projects where inside one building with all 12 floors, you'd have approximately 72 families, like about 7 families per floor. And so, in growing up there, first of all, well, we didn't know we were poor, because the bottom line is I was never around a lot of white people, and I was very rarely around Hispanics. And to tell you the truth, I thought that the Asian group of people were either Chinese or Japanese. I didn't know anything about Koreans. I didn't know anything about Filipinos. I didn't know anything. If you follow what I'm saying. Okay, I said all that to say this. When it came to church back then, first of all, I didn't realize that, as I just mentioned, the different cultures just then, I didn't realize everybody had separate denominations, denominational followings that they had. Just like you mentioned, you did better than me back then because I was pro secular. I mean, I was trying to follow Malcolm as a kid, and
Mm,
and, Louis Farrakhan, because Louis
mm.
Farrakhan used to be in Temple 25, uh, heading up a lot of things there in Newark, New Jersey. All my
Yeah, he
friends,
said he did actually say some stuff that kind of made sense. It would make you want to
he,
want to
he
follow
did.
it.
He made you want to follow it, they you taught that the Christianity, I didn't even know it as being separate from religion. If you're religious, you were following the white man, and this was the white man's religion, et cetera, et cetera. All right, being deep down in where I was at, and getting introduced to drugs and alcohol. That was the premise of my lifestyle growing up until I'm a fast forward out of that for what Regina's question generated. Uh, I wound up so high as a kite one night, no bragging, that I forgot all about when I was up on a rooftop with voices telling me to jump off head first and kill myself. That I had a Chick Tract in my pocket, the little Chick Christian tracts. And I'm show you how God works. That goes to show that you don't have to speak in Christianity with the Christianese. You don't have to have a religiosity mindset in a church building for God to render His call on your life. And when God called me, it was right up there. And I remember I told you, that's how I was a kid, man. I was blind. Yet God opened my eyes, not inside a church, but up on a roof, cold in December, November, with a Chick Tract that I had got from a lady that had given it to me in downtown Newark on the corner of Broad Market uh, about 2 months before. And I read this here thing about a Jesus Christ that I had never heard of. So many things inside there about what he had done and the point that he had did it for me. He didn't say whether or not if I was in a church in particular, if I had gone to a Baptist church, as you had mentioned. I didn't have to get caught up in any theatrics. I didn't have to do any cartwheels and flips. I didn't have to sit there and quote 50,000 verses of scripture to sound sanctified. I didn't have to do any of that. All I had to do was just read and repeat what was on the back of that track. And in reading and repeat what was on the back of that track, what it did was I didn't realize I was saying the sinner's prayer. That's 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 the thing about when God puts a call on your life. It's not that you followed your grandmother and your father and your grandfather and your mama, or your aunts and uncles because they went to church all the time and you went down that same route. When God puts a call on your life, it's individual. It's a direct call to you. And I'm thankful for Regina's question because the point for me was I had the light of heaven that shone on me on that roof that night. And when I gave my life to Christ, man, there wasn't no flash of lightning, no puff of smoke. You know, you don't need to actually go to the church to find Jesus Christ.
You don't.
You don't need to do that. Jesus can find you. You don't find him. And
Mm-hmm.
Jesus will find you no matter where you are. I'm living
Yep.
proof of that. I hadn't set foot into a church until I gave my life to Christ. I wasn't raised in the church. And to be honest with you, Regina, I'm glad that I wasn't raised in the church
Me too.
because I don't get caught up in all of those little idiosyncrasies
Yeah.
that the church brings about. And I don't mean to point the finger at brothers and sisters inside the church. I don't mean it to sound like that. But I think the danger is sometimes, as Rich said earlier, we get caught up in the theatrics,
Yep.
the emotionalism. Uh, you know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? So
Yeah.
to make a long story short for me, you don't have to be raised in the church, and I think that's what's been a turnoff for a lot of the kids today,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because
It
because they
has.
look at the illustrations that are presented to them in the
Hmm.
church, and they want something real. They
Yeah.
want somebody to accept them for who they are, where they ain't got 20,000 fingers pointing at them and putting them down. You know,
Mm.
not forgiving them
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
you find out they're gay, or you find out that they're a prostitute, or you find out that they're a drug dealer that's trying to come clean. The church has a bad way of taking knives and forks and spears and stabbing people like that, and then they wonder why the person won't come back to the church. Well, it's
Right.
because you haven't made a display of Christ.
Right.
You
Exactly.
haven't you haven't allowed Jesus Christ to operate through you to reach out to that person when they turn their head and feel that they're dirt You reach out and
Mm-hmm.
grab their hand and help them to stand up on their feet and say, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing that you talk about the how how we wonder like why they don't come back, and it's because we're not demonstrating essentially the love of Christ. And it's funny to me because when we read scripture and we read the life of Christ and the things that he did, he never like turned away from the sinner. You know what I mean? Like he would tell them, like he wasn't like saying, okay, it's okay for you to sin, it's okay for you to be, you know,
Right.
a liar or a
Right.
cheat, you know, to take away from people or to be a homosexual. He never said to them that it was okay for them to do that, but he still
Mm-hmm.
demonstrated love to them. He met them where they
Right.
were. And I think that when you and Richard both talk about how you didn't start out, you know, in that religious environment, you started out living your own life and you had your own path. I think that's what made you guys so powerful in your ministry, because you knew what it was like, you knew what it felt like. And
Right.
speaking from my own personal experience, when I share with people, I share with people like I made so many mistakes and I still make mistakes even as a
That's
Christian.
right.
But knowing the mistakes that I have made, knowing the things that I have done in the past, and then knowing that God still loves me in spite
That's right.
of, that's
That's
what makes
right.
my witness so strong. That's what made me
Mm-hmm.
love God so much. Not because I did all these things the right way and so he loves me. Like, no, I did things, a whole bunch of things the wrong
That's
way. And
right.
he
Yeah,
still
because he don't
loves
expect us
me.
to do things the right way anyway.
That's right. But you know, Regina, let me interject something that you just said a moment ago, and I'm glad you brought it up. That's why it's important for us as Christians now, not just Christian fathers, but Christian mothers also too.
Mm,
It's imperative that we sit down and get a full digestive understanding of the Gospel of John, because the Gospel of John tells you three words when you read the whole thing, and those three words is God is love. And you
Mm-hmm.
know, when you read all the way through there, you see where Christ is always as a child, a son, rendering reverential respect to the Father. It's all through it. Everywhere you read, God is love. Da, 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 da. God is love. The love of God. You know, and that's the way as a father. I know that Richard has the same thing I have. You got two sons. I've got two sons. Uh, it takes a real father to raise young men the correct way like that, not just as a daddy. You know, you can be a daddy, because see, a daddy ain't got to show up all the time. A daddy ain't got to be in there for all of the imperative things that are needed for that son to know. But a
Mm-hmm.
mom winds up doing those things that a father should be doing because the
Mm-hmm.
daddy don't want to do it. Now, as a father, I love my sons to death. And let me just make sure I don't want to go further, because if Regina has a question along this line, I don't want to jump the broom, so to speak.
you keep right on going.
Well, you know, with my sons, you know, when you look in the Bible, it tells you the importance of being in strong fatherhood, not just a father. And Ephesians 6:4 tells us to provoke not our children to wrath. It says,
Yeah.
provoke not our children to wrath, but to
Mm,
bring them up in the nurture and the encouragement, of the Lord. And that nurturing means um, you keep everybody close knit in the
mm,
family. You keep your sons close knit to you. You encourage them, but in along with the encouragement, you have to set up borders and a line of discipline so that they
Yes.
understand that you have their best interests at heart at all
Exactly.
times. And the parallel comes with what God does with us, because God does the same exact thing. He nurtures us. He keeps us as close knit as the Trinity is. Uh, the only time we break away and start doing things that a father shouldn't be doing is when we start looking inside ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
have a selfish mentality and not realize that everything that we're doing is a photo shoot for those boys. Uh, But that situation there is imperative to me. Proverbs 22:6, it tells us to train up a child in the way he should go,
Right.
and when he is old, he will not depart from it. I've had
Mm-hmm.
the wonderful experience of going through that with both of my sons,
Mm.
because both of them, they were raised up. There comes a point in time as a father, you have to realize you have to let go and let God.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? My sons, both of them, when they had their periods of rebellion and mess up, I
Mm.
got tickled when it was something that Richard said yesterday. We were talking that I asked you about your oldest son, and he said, "Well, he's in college right now, so he's kind of got a freedom where he
Mm-hmm.
do some." Well, see that those are remarkably true words because that's what happened with both of my sons. They became prodigals. Both of them. Paris did when he was at Delaware State University, and even when he was in Copiah Lincoln in Mississippi. Um, CJ did when he was at Charleston Southern. You know, it was a test of my fatherhood also that I didn't stop and think about because
Wow.
am I going to let go and not continue to try to discipline? With your face,
That's
Regina?
deep right there, Mr. Nate. That's deep. Especially, you talking to parents who are newly with a child in college, right? Like it's a test of your parenting. Are you gonna let go right there? Like, and I believe that boy, oh boy, when you talk about training up a child in the way they should go, I think that's not only for the child, but it's for the parent in the sense that, at
Right.
least for me, that's my experience, in the sense that when we released Elijah to go out into the world, I personally felt confident that God had him. Like, regardless
Yeah.
of what happens, I trust God's word. I trust that, we did the best that we could as parents to
There
teach
you
him, to show him the way that he's supposed to go, to show him how to make wise decisions. And then the rest of it, the choice is left up to him. But being able to trust God that we have done our part as parents and that God can do the rest, being able to like release him, that has been the biggest thing.
Well, it's hard
Not
for
for
us.
me.
It,
Okay, let me say for me, it's been hard because my husband is like, he 18, it's time to go.
That's what I did. He can do it too.
but
Got some issues, just come talk to us.
something though, Richard. Um, Treasure these periods of time with him in college right now because
Yeah.
you number one, you're developing a man, and that's what I had
Exactly.
to understand. And in developing a man, there's certain principles that we have to follow as fathers. You see, I'm not one of those fathers that believe do as I do.
Mm,
I
Me
don't
neither.
because I realize that both of my sons are both different. They have a different set of buttons on their panel, so
yeah.
I can't compare both of them together out of a cookie cutter mold. I can't do that. But I follow something all the time that Solomon said in the Proverbs. I remember Solomon said, "A wise son makes a father glad." He said, "A foolish son is a grief to his mother." And that's a true statement, because women, the emotional side comes out, which is necessarily uh, needed for us to be
Hmm.
better fathers, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I've seen some guys that said, "Well, no, you got to be strong and stuff," and why you crying and stuff like that. Listen, that son or that daughter, they need that emotionalism with their mother because the mom, she's gonna never let that umbilical cord go. I'm telling you right now, my mother is 100 years old, and when I talk to my mother on the phone, it's still like that umbilical cord is attached by things that she says. Unfortunately, I don't have the opportunity to talk to my dad because my father died back in the mid '80s. But
Mm.
what happened out of that, there was an estrangement between me and my dad for
Mm.
several years, and
Yeah. I had that
Paris,
issue too.
I know you did, and Paris, he wound up being the icebreaker when he was born because he was my father's first grandchild. And to watch my dad with him, it melted the ice completely in my heart because my father, I saw a side of him I didn't see. Now, for all that time that was lost there, what it did, instead of me being angry about it, it taught me to be a better father. It taught me to be, I will never let this happen with my sons. I will always be there for them regardless of what happens. Even if it's something that's bad that pops up, you know, I realize that I sired him. You know, I helped bring birth to him, and if he's a wise son, he'll be glad in me because he'll watch that I'm trying to make him into a man and develop things with him, tell him things that only a father can do. No rejection to any mother. I would never, not even single moms. But I'm saying that a father, if you're going to be a father and you're going to be a Christian father, do it in accordance with God's guidelines
Mm.
because God's guidelines are never wrong. Hebrews says that whom he loves, he chastens. If you substitute the word discipline there, it means whom he loves, he disciplines
Mhm.
because he wants us to develop as now into the image of Christ.
Well, Mr. Nate, I want to just kind of pause for a second because you and Richard both have talked about um, how either having like an estrangement from your father or just even family conflict, which is normal. Let me just say that because I don't want people to feel like their family has to be perfect, but kind of speak to what it was like for you to have that break kind of between you and your dad, and like speak to young men, I would say that, as of like what it was like and how you were able to manage moving forward beyond that, because I'm sure there are a lot of young men out there who may not know their father, they may not have a good relationship with their father, there may be some level of conflict, and from what I've seen, young men still need their fathers, whether their fathers are there, they need a mentor, they need something in their life. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I can, but I will let Richard go ahead and answer
Okay.
that first.
For me, I feel like I grew up with two sets of parents. My actual parents and my grandparents. My grandparents, I feel like they were pretty much my other parents. We were so close, and I would see them every weekend and sometimes throughout the week, pretty much every single weekend. During the summers, we would spend a couple of months with them in Louisiana. So I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. So for me, I really actually had two fathers, my father and my grandfather. So when me and my father had this, this big disagreement, um, and just kind of split for a while, I always still had my grandfather to talk to. Now, I'm not saying that's a great thing or something to, well, I got my grandfather, I'll just forget about my dad. That's not a good thing either. That's not something you should do, because especially if your dad was there for you, which he was. He was in the house with my mom. I grew up with both parents all the way, till I left to join the Navy. So he was a father. He was still there. What changed me really was God. What changed me and made me want to, you know, uh go back, mend that, and figure things out and not be as judgmental as I was, because that's really what split us, was me being judgmental and not understanding who he was or who he is as a person. That's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. And I feel like it's worse when it's your parent, especially a parent, like I said, that's been there your whole life. My dad was there my whole life. I was just lucky to have two, but he was there my whole life. So for those that probably struggle getting through it, yeah, I feel like, just get into the word as much as possible. Maybe find a mentor, a good mentor, to help you understand your situation and try and go back and try to mend those fences. Because now that we're not what we were at that time, there was times even when we weren't talking, I'm sitting here like, man, I miss talking to my dad. Even though I talked to my grandfather, I'm like, man, I miss talking to my dad. and you're going to have that, and a father teaches so much to a son. They show so much to a son, and you can learn as a young man, a boy, you can learn so much from that father that's just been there. He sets examples. He helps you to avoid some mistakes that he made. That's a big one. A lot of times we don't want to listen, but it's imperative to listen, because most fathers, if not all fathers that are really trying to be fathers, they don't want you to make those mistakes. So they're trying to help you become better versions of them.
That's right.
Not exactly them, but just do better than me. That's one of my biggest things for my boys. I need y'all to do better than me. I need y'all to have advantages that I didn't have. I need y'all to, just look at things in the ways that I didn't look at things when I was your age, so you don't run into the same issues.
Hey, Faith and Theory family, I'd just like to take the time out to say thank you for tuning into the show today. It has been my absolute pleasure to share with you the everyday journey of everyday people that can inspire your heart. If you've enjoyed this episode, do me a favor and leave a review. If you haven't already, don't forget to like, follow, share, and subscribe to stay in the know of what's to come. Also, be sure to visit my website, www.faithandtheory.com, to get exclusive content and free therapeutic tips. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, many blessings to you and yours from Faith and Theory. Bye-bye.